Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone. I'm Emily Silver. I'm the Director of Curatorial Affairs and Strategic Partnerships at WEM, and I'm so excited to have you join us for today's Spotlight Talk, which is focused on the filming of the Peabody Award-winning PBS documentary series Craft in America at WEM. This is really a perfect topic for our last Spotlight Talk of 2022. It's hard to believe that the year is ending. And a special year for us, right? This is our 50th anniversary year, which we've centered around different ideas of home. Likewise, the episode in which the museum appeared for Craft in America is also focused on home and specifically on artists, both contemporary and past, whose environments, home environments are filled with meaning and metaphor. So we're gonna have about a 20-minute roundtable conversation with myself, our Executive Director, Julie Siglin, and Director of Interpretation and Research, Holly Gore, and my rope-in Communications and Program Specialist, Larissa Huff, because she was also a part of the episode. All of us were filmed for the episode. We'll definitely have time for audience questions, so feel free to put those in the chat box throughout, and I'll try to incorporate them into our conversation, and then we'll have some time at the end. If we don't get to your questions in the midst of the conversation. Before we get to our chat though, I want to show a brief clip from the episode so that folks who have not yet had a chance to view it can get a sense of the show. It's currently airing on wherever you watch PBS and streaming on PBS's website. So I hope that you'll have a chance to watch the full thing, but I think I'm going to ask Katie to bring up about a 2.5-minute clip so people can get a sense of the episode. And as you can see, it's also on our website. And I think we're having some problems with sound, Katie.
A space that is a total work of art, from the exterior walls to the hand-carved spoons in the kitchen. Those lines between what is work and what is home were very much blurred for Esherick. He had that ingrained sensibility about what home means, what comfort means, what function means, and what beauty means. I have seen people walk into this space for the first time and cry. They get very quiet, they get very animated. Morton's son-in-law called it the House of Wows, and I hear people coming up the stairs going, wow.
Morton Esherick's approach to living, to working, is that it is this fully integrated kind of way of looking at one's life. This philosophy that there is nothing too small for artistic input. What he wanted to express aesthetically wasn't only in furniture. It came out in sculpture, it came out in prints, it came out in all sorts of other forms of making. And so why couldn't it come out in a coffee cup?
My single favorite element of the studio is in this space, and it's the hand-carved heat return in this wall. Morton solves a problem, does it in a way that is fun and incredibly beautiful.
Morton Esherick was trained as a painter at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. He married Letty Nofer in 1912, and they had 3 children. He started out with advantages that many people don't have. He had an inheritance that allowed him to buy this property, and for the better part of 16 years tries to build a career as a painter. The family lived in the farmhouse. In 1926, Morton decided that he needed a workspace that was apart from the farmhouse. Then he came up the hill and built his studio.
On his daily commute.
And I'll just stop the share there unless you wanted me to keep going.
No, that's great.
Okay.
I think it gives people a little bit of a sense of what the episode looked like. And so I want to, just start a conversation with my colleagues here, Julie and Holly, who you both saw in that clip, about what Craft in America is, both the show and the organization that produces it, and how we connected with them to be featured in an episode of the program, and this one in particular. Julie, do you want to try to take that?
Sure. I was really excited when Carol Savayan, who was the director of Craft in America, both the physical gallery location and the series, contacted us. I think that the Esherick Museum has been on a trajectory towards better contextualizing Wharton in the field of art history and American contemporary craft and decorative arts. And Craft in America is such a far-reaching platform. It's introducing craft to folks who maybe are just tuning into PBS to see what wonderful educational program might be on air this evening, or it's people who are actively seeking it out. Regardless, it's bigger than the reach that we have been able to have. And I think it was a real testament to the work that this team has been doing to try and put Wharton in a bigger and more appropriate context than he historically has been. So, and then of course, from Carol to every person on the crew who showed up that day, as one would expect, were the loveliest people. And for me, that was my favorite part, was getting to know those folks through the process and to experience the sort of magic of the movies and see how they do it all and how the cameras, they get these sneaky angles and pull it all together, and how much work goes into a really short segment that really so beautifully portrayed the studio.
Yeah, it's so Craft in America is an interesting organization, right? They have the documentaries, but it's one arm of what they do. And so there's also a 501c3 that has an exhibition space in Los Angeles. And Carol Savayan, who is Julie has mentioned, sort of, this is her baby. She and I first crossed paths, gosh, now it's actually kind of a very long time ago, in 2008, when Craft in America aired its first episode. So this is a series that's been running for a very long time. And that was connected with a traveling exhibition that looked at the spectrum of American craft, and a really wonderful publication. We can put links to that publication in the follow-up email that we're sending here. So this is a project that has been ongoing for some time, and Esherick has been on their radar for a long time, and we're glad we sort of made it to them in this later season. I'd also encourage people to check out the Craft in America website. Not only can you see information about the exhibitions in their in-person space in LA, but also they have incredible resources from all of the previous exhibitions and documentary series there. So it's a really interesting, multifaceted kind of educational organization.
It really is. And I learned so much just from the episode that we appeared in, let alone the other episodes. They have such an expansive definition of what craft means, which I think is terrific. And the range of folks featured in our episode was just fantastic.
So I'm curious if we can talk a little bit, and maybe Holly can start on this, about like how we prepared for the filming process and what was filmed versus what ended up airing in the episode. Oh, Holly, you are on mute.
Thank you. So for me, I came to work at the Wharton Esherick Museum in October of 2021. And so some of this process was already underway. We already had plans in the works for a full year's programming on the topic of home. And I knew that, the episode was happening. For me, when I learned that I would be invited to participate, which I was incredibly honored to do, one of the first things I thought is, how can an art historian, which is what my training is, bring something new to this context. And one of the things that I knew the producers wanted to do is that they wanted to make a connection with Wharton Esherick's good friend, Henry Varnum Poor, who was an artist, a painter, also worked in functional art like Wharton Esherick, and very interestingly, also built a handmade home during the 1920s, starting around the time that Wharton Esherick did, and which also featured a really interesting and unusual spiral staircase like we have here. So I started looking in the archives here just to see what I could find on the relationship between the two of them. I mean, as with many close friendships, a lot of things I think are just spoken. And so there's maybe less in writing than there might be with a client or something like that. But was to kind of putting that together and starting to think about, you know, kind of a historical angle to this theme of home.
Julie, any thoughts on preparing for the filming process?
For me, it was trying to convey the emotive qualities of the studio and how could we, with this somewhat unparalleled platform of visibility, to let people know that we were here and we're open for tours and we're sharing Wharton's legacy. How do you entice people and convey that what the experience of a studio visit really is? And you know, something we talk about as a team and aspirational in our interpretation is the gift of time here. And that's really what is such a important thing to strive for. But in a 5-minute segment, we weren't really going to get that, or however long the segment was. So just thinking about how can I point out the details that bring forth, for me, the emotional qualities of the studio, what it feels like to walk in there. And I think the camera work that PBS did, they really had such a keen eye for the qualities, not just the objects, but how they are grouped together, and details that really pulled it all together. And I think they nailed it because it's hard to watch that. And if you haven't been, say, gee, I really need to go and experience that. You can look at pictures and images and footage of it all day long, but it was really about enticing people to come and experience this.
Well, and I think you're getting at something that's so in sort of strategizing and thinking about preparation for the filming process, we really had to think about these big picture themes. So like you and I, Julie, sat down and like made some outlines of like talking points and things that we knew we wanted them to focus on, or spaces that we knew that we wanted them to highlight in the filming. And so there was that kind of big picture conceptualization of what kind of narratives we want to convey and what kind of narratives are going to be best conveyed through a moving image as opposed to an essay or a photograph. But then there was also, you know, thinking about the small moments and thinking about, you know, are there individual shots or individual sort of close-ups that kind of get at some of these big picture points from a sort of smaller and more intimate perspective. I'm thinking, Holly, you know, we were talking after we saw the episode of just how many shots there are of like you trailing your hand over a surface. You know, so we're balancing those like big points with, okay, how do we get across the like tactility of this place? It's watching somebody's hand, you know, caress an object in a way that like not all of our visitors can do, but now you can get a sense of somebody doing it in that kind of close up. You know, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about like the actual process of filming, how many days they were on site, what it took for us to get ready, and even like some of the interesting tricks and techniques we saw the crew use to capture the site, because you know, this is not a site where you can just come in and like set up your camera and get a whole big expansive picture. You have to really, you know, think creatively about how to capture the site.
Absolutely. And it was so serendipitous that our theme for our 50th anniversary in 2022 being open to the public was home. And then this episode that Craft in America happened to reach out to us about, without knowing that, was also going to be home. So, you know, the domestic qualities and the comfort of the studio needed to be front and center. And like you do when you're having guests to your home for dinner or whatnot, you clean. You spend a lot of time cleaning. So there was a lot of that leading up to it, and thinking through, as we do when we have visitors into such small, intimate spaces, the flow of people through the spaces. And then to Emily's point, what details and what objects are going to tell these stories that we had sort of chunked into a framework best. I believe they were here over 3 days, 2.5 days. I marveled at how efficient they were, walking into a space and saying, that's going to be the shot. We want you here. We want you here talking about this. And then thinking through those little things that were so impactful, like a close-up of Holly's hand walking or smoothing over a handrail. The little clip of her walking up the stairs, I think really is just such a lovely detail. So you felt as though the overall effect for me was that it felt like you were really moving through the space, and that it was a comfortable place where you felt welcome to reach out and touch. I don't know what kind of camera it is, but I know they had this very cool ability with this particular camera and it had the ability, an armature that allowed it to move in any direction. It was like, and so they were able to, I think in the workshop image, in the 1956 workshop, right before you appear, Emily, is where you really see that. And it gives you a panoramic that also kind of goes up and down. And it really is, I think, what your eye would track when you walked into this space for the first time. So that would, to me, stood out, how the camera operators were able to walk in and say, this is what I just saw. How do I have the camera do that and share that with people?
One of the things that I was really impressed with throughout the whole process of filming was just the kind of the skill and the level of interest from the person who was interviewing me. What you don't see in any of the episode, which is cut out, is that almost everything that I'm saying is in response to an interviewer's question. And Kobe Atlas was the director of the segment, and she was the most wonderful person just to talk to. I mean, she sat me down with the microphone and the lights, and I just felt like I was having a conversation with a really interesting person who was really interested in what we were doing and what I would have to say. And, I was just really struck with that, how much that kind of unseen work makes all the difference in the world in putting together something like this.
I would echo that strongly, Holly, that the questions were very, very, very thoughtful, and the process was very, very comfortable. Like most people, I would assume I get a little nervous right before I'm on camera, but I recall that throughout this process, it was probably by far the most relaxed I've been in that type of setting.
I just want to, sorry. No, I was just going to say, speaking of unseen work, I think Holly was talking a lot about this unseen work. And I think for me, the most interesting unseen component of the filming was, in the studio, things are as they are, right? You can decide what vantage point or where you want to shoot things from, but there's not a lot of like wholesale reorganization to be done. In our conversations with the folks from Craft in America, they really wanted to shoot the workshop. And so figuring out how we take a space that's not open to the public currently, how that has a lot of sort of material from our office in it, how we sort of get it so that you can get the feel of the architecture without having to completely transform the space, which would be impossible for us to do on their deadline. That was really fascinating to watch, especially how certain things were framed. We were pulling in collections objects to sort of stage setups to be filmed next to, and really thinking about it as a stage set as much as anything else. Holly, did you had something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, it was just a response to something Julie had said. That's fine.
Oh, okay. I mean, we've got 2 questions here in the chat, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions from from other folks. So now is the time to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask if we come to a little lull in the conversation. The first question here is whether we noticed if any of the crew felt especially drawn to a specific Wharton Esherick piece.
Well, I know that there were certain things that they knew they wanted to film right away. So the shots of me going up the steps was within just an hour of them arriving. You know, they just set up and someone has to walk up those steps. Someone has to touch that handrail. That was something they knew right away that they wanted. And they really seem to like the trap door as well, the bedroom trap door on the pulley. They got a lot of footage of the pulley itself running. That ended up being kind of an extra that's, I think you can see on the website, it's not part of the actual home episode, but they knew the things that they wanted to have demonstrated.
I think, you know, one of the really interesting things about the crew, right, is that the folks from Craft in America, who are the producers, this is their full-time gig. The folks from the film crew are PBS cameramen, right? So they move on from filming for this to going to film for a music documentary, to going to film for, right? So it was really fun to be in the house with them because these are not necessarily people who come from the craft world, and they're, you know, it's just like any visitor to Esherick's home for the first time who doesn't necessarily exactly know what they're in for coming into the space. You know, they are experts at what they do, but they're also coming a little bit into a world that's outside of their norm and having to like figure it out really quickly. And I think that was an exciting process to watch.
Yeah, and fall in love with objects and spaces pretty quickly as well. Most people are enamored with the trapdoor, but they were also honing in on, you know, small details of furniture and just becoming entranced like the rest of us.
We've got another question here about whether we've seen an impact on tours, memberships, and donations from the show. It just aired on the 16th of December. Like it's been streaming for a little bit, but we're really doing this pretty shortly after it's been made available to the public. But it will be interesting to see because it certainly is a different kind of platform and audience than we might have with our programs, our virtual programs. They go to people who are already interested in Esherick. This is going to hit people who like sit down to watch PBS NewsHour and may leave the TV on, and all of a sudden they're like in the spiral staircase, right?
I see Lisa has a question about which object is seen in this segment.
Oh, Lisa, I think that is Cat in the Grass.
Yes.
That you're talking about there. For the first question, I'm looking at the...
Lisa, that sits on the flat top desk right in the middle of the studio gallery. And it's a beautiful, sensual, abstract cat figure. And then a sort of sizable block that it's sitting on with carved grass blades and flowers. I don't know the answer to the trivia question that she posed. Anybody know that? Inside the workshop.
We'll have to.
That's a good research.
Look, yeah.
Well, honestly, after watching the earlier segment for 5 or 10 minutes of this man working in those wide pants and then seeing that photo, I was just struck like, wow, is that the same type of pant?
Yeah.
A closer look at the photo might help.
Larissa Huff is on our team and is a furniture maker and wood artist. And I think, Larissa, I know that within that community, there are brands of workwear that become, you know, contemporarily, that become very popular and ubiquitous. And I wonder if that's something akin to like Dovetail or Carhartts or whatever we're talking about now.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's possible there was like a very specific reason for it too. I'm like, I wrote a bunch of notes down to look into it because I'm very intrigued.
And Lisa, your last question about the camera work, you know, maybe somebody else pointed out that kind of repetition of form. It wasn't me, but I think it's really a testament to not only the folks who were on site that day, but also the editors who had to take 2.5 days of footage and kind of stitch it together in ways where not only was there a sort of clear narrative running through the piece, but also there were these moments of visual connections. Like it's always amazing to be around people who are so good at what they do and to see it so clearly in the final product. We have time for another question or two, and if we, you know, I can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question or put it in the chat. And if there are no questions, I want to actually bring Larissa back in, because one of the things that we did as we were planning for the filming was, you know, we wanted to have some shots that sort of spoke to Eshrick's legacy and its impact on contemporary artists and makers. And so Larissa was kind enough to showcase her skills in the film. And I'm curious if you might have, you know, a sentence or two to say about what it was like being filmed.
It was an honor, but it was interesting because I had to do woodworking in a place where we don't actually do woodworking. We celebrate it and we study it and we admire it, but we don't actually do the woodworking. So it was interesting to transform that section of the workshop into a functional space for like an hour and actually clamp things to the bench and actually like use tools in there. So that was really fun. And it was fun to think about my practice in the context of the space that we work in, and be asked by someone who knows so much about craft as a whole. So it was really fun.
Well, we were glad you were able to participate.
Can't wait to see the finished frame.
Yes,
that you were working on.
I will do that at some point.
We will share that on social media.
And Lisa liked it, so thank you, Lisa. It was very illuminating. It's nice, you know, it's nice to have a mix of that making and have it directly relate back to what people are looking at. We have time for one more question if anyone has one. And if not, we invite you to think about snuggling down with your family in front of the TV and a cup of hot chocolate or whatever your holiday beverage of choice is, and think about Craft in America as some potential like holiday break viewing. It's a really wonderful episode. I think made better. Wharton's Martinis, that's a great idea for your holiday beverage of choice. We're so thrilled that this is going to be out there serving as an ambassador for the museum. We'll be doing spotlight talks in 2023, Lisa, but unfortunately, I don't think we have another Craft in America in our books. But if any other esteemed documentary series want to feature Wharton, just give us a call. We're happy to facilitate. Katie's just dropped in the chat our next spotlight talk, our first spotlight talk of the new year, will focus on Wharton and Miriam in the archives. We'll explore some recent discoveries and chat with Erin Palmer, who worked for about 10 weeks as our archives fellow, funded by the Pew Center. So we're really excited to bring her and her work and her discoveries to our community here, and looking forward to seeing you for that on January 17th at noon next year. It's hard to believe, but we're so thrilled that you were able to spend today with us. And if folks would like to unmute and say a goodbye and send off 2022, and we'd love to see all of your faces, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you all for staying engaged with us and participating in these events, and we hope to see you in 2023.
Thank you.